The incident occurred on a Tuesday afternoon, beneath a canopy of oak trees in a neighborhood where the lawns were uniformly green and the silence was a commodity. The man stopped was David Sterling, a 42-year-old black man, wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans, returning from a run. The officer was Keith Miller, badge number 714, a 10-year veteran of the Northwood Police Department, who saw not a resident, but a threat. The stop was predicated on a vague report of a burglary suspect in the area, a black male in dark clothing. The abuse was the immediate presumption of guilt, the condescending dismissal of Sterling's identity, and the derisive laughter that echoed on the quiet street when a man in a hoodie claimed to be one of the most senior civil rights attorneys in the United States Department of Justice. What followed was an illegal detention, an institutional cover-up, and a federal lawsuit that would force the city to confront the rot within its own ranks. The body cam footage begins with a jolt, the timestamp reading 14 hours 32 minutes and 17 seconds. Officer Miller steps out of his patrol car, the crunch of gravel under his boots sharp and aggressive. The blue and red lights are already painting streaks across the manicured hedges and whitewashed fences, a garish intrusion on the suburban peace. David Sterling is standing on the sidewalk, hands held loosely at his sides, his breathing steady from his recent jog. He watches the officer approach, his expression neutral, a mask of calm he has learned to wear in a world that often mistakes his existence for a provocation. "Hold it right there," Miller barks, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered Glock. The command is unnecessarily loud, designed to establish dominance from the outset. "Let me see your hands." David raises his hands slowly, palms open, a gesture of compliance that feels both practiced and weary. "Good afternoon, officer," he says, his voice even, betraying no hint of the adrenaline now coursing through his veins. "Is there a problem?" Miller stops about 10 feet away, his feet planted wide. He scans David from head to toe, his eyes lingering on the plainness of his clothes, the sweat on his brow, and the color of his skin. The assessment is quick, the conclusion already formed. "We've had reports of a burglary in the area. A suspect matching your description." The phrase hangs in the air, stale and flimsy. David knows what it means. It is the universal pretext, the catch-all justification. "My description?" David asks, a hint of challenge buried beneath the polite inquiry. "Could you be more specific?" Miller's jaw tightens. He doesn't like being questioned. He is the authority here. Black male, dark clothing, seen casing houses. He gestures vaguely down the street. "That's you, isn't it? Taking a little tour of the neighborhood?" The condescension is thick, dripping with insinuation. David resists the urge to sigh. He has been in this exact conversation a dozen times in his life, in different cities, with different officers, but the script is always the same. "Officer," he says, his tone remaining professional, "I live here. My house is 2 blocks that way." He nods his head to the left. "I'm just finishing my daily run." Miller lets out a short, incredulous laugh. It's a harsh, grating sound. "You live here?" "Right. In one of these places." He sweeps his arm in an arc, indicating the million-dollar homes that line the street. The implication is clear. You don't belong here. "Yes, I do," David replies, his patience wearing thin. "My name is David Sterling. I live on Crestview Lane." The officer's eyes narrow into slits. He is enjoying this, the slow, methodical dismantling of a man's dignity. "Sterling, huh? Well, Mr. Sterling, I'm going to need to see some identification. Prove you live where you say you live." This is the first procedural misstep, David notes internally. The demand for ID without reasonable, articulable suspicion that a specific crime has been, is being, or is about to be committed. A vague description is not enough, not in this state. But he knows arguing the finer points of Terry versus Ohio with an officer high on his own authority is a fool's errand. "My ID is in my wallet at home," David states simply. "I don't carry it when I run." Miller's smile is a predator's grin. "No ID. How convenient. You understand that makes you look more suspicious, right?" He takes a step closer, invading David's personal space. The camera on his chest captures the slight tremor in his hand, a sign of his own agitation. "I'm not trying to look any particular way, officer. I'm just telling you the facts." David's voice is a low, steady anchor in the swirling sea of Miller's hostility. A car slows as it passes, the driver's face a mixture of curiosity and concern. A woman walking her dog on the other side of the street stops, her hand shielding her eyes as she stares. The audience is gathering. This public stage makes everything more dangerous. Miller senses the eyes on him, and it seems to fuel his aggression rather than temper it. The facts are you match a description and you can't prove who you are or what you're doing in this neighborhood. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your hands on your head, and you're going to stay right here while I figure out who you really are. The command is an escalation, a deliberate provocation. David remains still, his hands still raised. Officer, on what grounds am I being detained? He asks, his voice sharp with legal precision. You haven't provided articulable suspicion of a specific crime. Matching a description is not sufficient grounds for detention. Miller's face flushes with anger. The calm, legalistic language is a direct challenge to his authority, an insult to his intelligence. Are you a lawyer or something? He sneers. You watch a couple of TV shows and think you know the law? I'm the law out here, pal. And I'm telling you, you're being detained for officer safety and for the purpose of investigation. The lie is blatant. Officer safety is a shield, not a sword. I'm not a threat to you, officer, David says, his gaze unwavering. I am standing here, unarmed, and answering your questions. Detaining me without cause is a violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. The mention of the Constitution seems to enrage Miller further. He unclips the radio from his shoulder. Dispatch, I've got a possible 10 to 31 suspect, non-compliant. Requesting backup, he is manufacturing a crisis, creating a narrative of a dangerous encounter to justify his actions. The situation is spiraling, and David knows he has to make a choice. He can continue to be the compliant victim, hoping for a peaceful resolution that seems increasingly unlikely, or he can try to de-escalate by revealing a part of himself he rarely uses outside of a courtroom. He chooses the latter. Officer, this is unnecessary, David says, his voice cutting through the tension. I suggest you listen to me very carefully. You're making a serious mistake. Miller clips the radio back on his shoulder, a smirk playing on his lips. Oh, I'm all ears. Please, enlighten me. Who are you really? It is the classic, arrogant taunt, the question asked by a man who believes he holds all the cards. He expects a lie, a plea, a desperate fabrication. He is not prepared for the truth. My name is David Sterling, David repeats, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative register that commands attention. I am a Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the United States Department of Justice. I work in the Civil Rights Division. For a moment, there is only silence, broken by the chirping of birds in the oak trees. Miller stares at him, his brain processing the words. Then, he throws his head back and laughs. It is not a small chuckle. It is a full-throated, belly-shaking roar of derision. The sound is ugly and mocking, echoing down the pristine street. The Department of Justice, he gasps, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. The Civil Rights Division? Oh, that's a new one. I'll give you points for creativity, pal. That's the best one I've heard all year. He shakes his head, still chuckling. You people will say anything, won't you? The phrase, you people, hangs in the air, a final confirmation of the prejudice driving the entire encounter. David's face remains impassive, but inside, a cold fury is solidifying. He has seen this before, the willful blindness, the refusal to believe that a black man in a hoodie could possibly hold a position of power and authority. It is the cornerstone of the systemic injustice he has dedicated his life to fighting. It's not a story, officer, David says, his voice devoid of emotion. It's a fact, and you are currently in the process of violating the civil rights of a federal official. I would strongly advise you to stop. Miller's laughter subsides, replaced by a renewed wave of anger. The joke isn't funny to him anymore. He sees David's calm insistence not as a statement of fact, but as the ultimate act of defiance. You know what? Miller says, stepping forward and unsnapping the handcuff pouch on his belt. Impersonating a federal officer is a felony, and you just confessed to it on my body camera. So now you're not just a burglary suspect. You're a liar and a felon. He reaches out to grab David's arm. David doesn't flinch. He doesn't resist. He stands his ground, a pillar of stillness amidst the officer's manufactured storm. Officer Miller, he says, his voice now like ice. Touch me, and you will be adding battery to the list of charges you will eventually face. I am giving you one last chance to de-escalate. Call your supervisor. Now, the woman with the dog is now openly recording with her phone. Another neighbor has emerged onto his porch, his phone also raised. The silent witnesses are becoming a jury. Miller sees the phones, and a flicker of something, perhaps doubt, perhaps just annoyance, crosses his face. But he has gone too far to back down now without losing face. His pride is on the line. "I don't need a supervisor to handle a lying punk like you," he snarls. He lunges forward, grabbing David's left wrist and twisting it behind his back with a sharp, painful motion. The body cam footage shakes violently, capturing a close-up of David's face. His eyes closed for a brief second as he absorbs the pain. But when he opens them, his gaze is as focused and intense as a laser. "You have made your choice, officer," David says, his voice strained but steady. Remember that the metallic click of the first handcuff closing around his wrist is deafening in the quiet afternoon. The cold steel is a familiar indignity, a symbol of a power structure he fights from within every single day. As Miller fumbles with the second cuff, his overconfidence making him clumsy, David speaks again, his voice precise and clear, a lawyer dictating a statement for the record. "My federal credentials are in a black leather wallet in the inside left breast pocket of my hoodie. I am authorizing you to retrieve them. When you do, I want you to read the name and title aloud for your body camera and for the witnesses present." Miller pauses, the second handcuff dangling from his hand. This is an unexpected turn. He is intrigued by the challenge, confident that he will find a fake ID, a library card, anything to cement his victory. "You really want to play this out?" he sneers, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. "Fine by me. Let's see what kind of joke ID you bought off the internet." He shoves David roughly against the patrol car, the impact jarring the camera again. With one hand holding David's cuffed wrist, he uses the other to awkwardly pat down David's chest. He feels the rectangular shape of the wallet and pulls it out. It is a simple, high-quality black leather wallet. It feels heavy, substantial. He flips it open. The first thing he sees is not a driver's license. It is a gold-embossed seal of the United States Department of Justice. Beneath it, a holographic photograph of David Sterling, looking directly at the camera in a suit and tie, his expression serious and professional. And below the photo, the bold, unmistakable black letters, David M. Sterling, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division, U.S. Department of Justice. The timestamp on the body cam reads 14 hours, 38 minutes, and 4 seconds. For 12 full seconds, there is no sound from Officer Miller. The shaky camera footage becomes unnaturally still as he holds the credentials, his arm frozen in midair. The world seems to slow down. The chirping of the birds, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of leaves. It all fades into a dull roar in his ears. The body cam is pointed directly at the credentials, the gold seal glinting in the afternoon sun. Then, slowly, the camera pans up, shakily, to David's face, then back down to the credentials, as if Miller's brain is refusing to connect the two realities. The man in the hoodie and the man in the suit cannot be the same person. The suspect cannot be the prosecutor. The color drains from Miller's face. His ruddy, confident complexion turns to a pasty, sickly white. A single bead of sweat trickles down his temple. His mouth opens and closes silently, like a fish out of water. The smirk is gone, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated panic. "Read it," David says, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a tidal wave. "As I instructed." Miller swallows hard. His voice, when it finally comes, is a hoarse, strangled whisper. "David M. Sterling, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division." He says the words as if they are a foreign language he doesn't understand. He looks from the ID to David's face, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. The entire power dynamic of the encounter has not just shifted, it has been annihilated. A moment ago, he was the law, the enforcer, the man in control. Now, he is a small-town cop who has just illegally assaulted and handcuffed one of the most powerful civil rights attorneys in the country. He has handed his career, his pension, and his freedom to the very man he was trying to humiliate. "Now take these cuffs off me," David commands, his voice no longer that of a potential victim, but of a superior officer giving an order. Miller fumbles for the key, his hands trembling so violently he can barely fit it into the lock. The second cuff, which he never managed to secure, clatters uselessly against the first. He unlocks the bracelet on David's wrist, the click echoing his own professional demise. He steps back, creating a wide space between them, as if David were now radioactive. The backup unit he called screeches to a halt behind his own car. Two younger officers jump out, ready for a confrontation, their hands on their weapons. They stop dead in their tracks, their expressions turning from aggressive readiness to utter confusion as they take in the scene. Their senior officer, Miller, looking pale and terrified, and a black man in a hoodie calmly rubbing his wrist, now holding a set of official DOJ credentials. "Everything okay here, Keith?" one of the younger officers asks, his eyes darting between Miller and David. Miller can't seem to form a sentence. He just shakes his head, still staring at David. David steps forward, turning his attention to the new arrivals. He holds up his credentials for them to see. "This officer, badge 714, he says, his voice ringing with authority, has just committed an illegal detention and assault. I need both of your names and badge numbers. You are both now witnesses in a federal investigation." The two officers exchange a panicked look. They are caught, accessories after the fact to a catastrophe they don't even understand yet. One of them, a young woman, immediately begins speaking into her radio, her voice tight with urgency. "Dispatch, we need a supervisor at this location immediately. Advise him it is a priority 1 situation." The supervisor, a portly sergeant named Daniels, arrives in under 3 minutes, his tires squealing as he pulls up. He gets out of his car, his face a mask of weary frustration, clearly expecting to find a routine complaint. What he finds is Officer Miller, white as a sheet and refusing to make eye contact, two junior officers looking like they want to be anywhere else on earth, and David Sterling, who now has his phone to his ear. "Yes, Tom, it's me," David is saying into the phone. The person on the other end is clearly someone of importance. "I'm fine, but there's been an incident." "Yes, in Northwood. Officer Keith Miller, badge 714. Unlawful detention, assault, clear profiling." "No, I have it handled for now, but I need you to initiate a formal inquiry with their department's Office of Professional Responsibility. And get me the direct line for the U.S. Attorney for this district." "This is going to be one of ours." Sergeant Daniels approaches David cautiously, his demeanor a world away from Miller's earlier aggression. "Sir," he begins, his voice respectful. "I'm Sergeant Daniels. Can you please tell me what's happened here?" David ends his call and turns his full attention to the sergeant. He recounts the events of the last 15 minutes with cold, factual precision, leaving out no detail. The baseless stop, the vague description, the demand for ID, the scoffing laughter, the illegal detention, the assault. As he speaks, the woman who had been recording the incident on her phone walks over. "I got the whole thing on video, sir," she says to David, ignoring the officers completely. "From the moment he started yelling at you. He laughed when you told him who you were. He laughed." She offers to send him the file, and David thanks her, taking down her information. Sergeant Daniels looks at Miller, his expression a mixture of fury and despair. "Miller, is this true? Did you cuff this man?" Miller, finally finding his voice, begins to stammer out a defense. "Sarge, he matched the description. He was being evasive, wouldn't give me his ID. He claimed he was a Fed. I thought he was lying. I was following procedure." David cuts him off. "Your procedure is to detain individuals without articulable suspicion? Your procedure is to laugh at a citizen's identity and then assault them when they assert their constitutional rights? Sergeant, your officer is not just a problem. He is a liability. And today, his liability became this city's." He holds up the credentials again for Daniels to see. The sergeant looks at the gold seal and his face falls. He has spent 20 years on the force, and he knows exactly what this means. This isn't a complaint that can be buried in paperwork. This is a federal case. This is a career-ending, department-gutting nightmare. "Get in your car, Miller," Daniels orders, his voice low and seething. "Go back to the station. Write your report. And do not talk to anyone else." He turns back to David, his tone now pleading. "Mr. Sterling." "Sir, on behalf of the Northwood Police Department, I sincerely apologize for Officer Miller's conduct. This is not how we train our officers. We will conduct a thorough investigation. I promise you that." David looks at the sergeant, his expression unreadable. He has heard these promises before. He has read hundreds of internal affairs reports that conclude with actions justified or officer exonerated. He knows the blue wall of silence is thick and strong. A thorough investigation, David repeats, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. I expect nothing less. You will be hearing from my office. And from the U.S. Attorney's office. You can be sure of that. He turns and begins to walk away, back toward his home on Crestview Lane, leaving the chaos of flashing lights and panicked cops behind him. The afternoon quiet has been shattered, and the ugly truth of the neighborhood has been laid bare. For David, the fight was far from over. It had just begun. The initial report from the Northwood Police Department's Internal Affairs Division landed on David's desk 2 weeks later. It was a masterclass in bureaucratic obfuscation. The investigation, led by a lieutenant known to be a close friend of Miller's, concluded that Officer Miller had acted within departmental guidelines. It cited the burglary report as sufficient cause for the initial stop, framing David's refusal to provide ID as uncooperative behavior that justified his brief detention. The report mentioned David's claim of being a DOJ official but characterized Miller's reaction not as mockery, but as professional skepticism. In the face of an extraordinary claim, the physical altercation was described as a standard application of control holds on a potentially resistive subject. The report concluded that no policies were violated and recommended no disciplinary action beyond a remedial course in de-escalation tactics for Officer Miller. It was a complete and total whitewash. They were closing ranks, protecting their own, and calling him a liar. They had investigated themselves and found themselves innocent. David read the final page, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. He had anticipated this, but the sheer audacity of the cover-up was still galling. They had the body cam footage. They had multiple witness videos. They had the sworn testimony of a deputy assistant attorney general. And still, they chose to protect the aggressor. They were betting he would let it go, that the embarrassment and hassle of a public fight would be too much. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation. David picked up his phone and dialed his personal attorney, a renowned civil rights litigator he had known since law school. Jessica, it's David, he said when she answered. They exonerated him. Let's file. File against the city, the department, and Miller personally. And don't hold back. The lawsuit, filed in federal court, was for $11 million. It alleged racial profiling, unlawful seizure, excessive force, assault, battery, and conspiracy to violate civil rights under Section 1983. The complaint was a meticulously crafted, 50-page document that laid out the incident in excruciating detail, contrasting Officer Miller's actions with the department's own written policies and the United States Constitution. When the lawsuit was filed, the dam of silence broke. The witness videos, which had been held in reserve, were released to the press. The footage went viral overnight. The image of Officer Miller laughing in David's face became a national symbol of arrogant, prejudiced policing. The body cam footage, obtained through a discovery motion, was even more damning, capturing every sneering word, every escalating threat. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Protesters gathered outside the Northwood Police Station and City Hall. National news outlets picked up the story. The city council was inundated with calls for Miller's termination and the police chief's resignation. The city's initial response was to double down, issuing a statement defending the IA investigation and vowing to vigorously defend against the meritless lawsuit. But their position was untenable. The visual evidence was too powerful, the plaintiff too credible. Behind the scenes, the city's attorneys knew they were facing an unwinnable case. The depositions were brutal. Officer Miller, under oath, became a sweating, stammering wreck. When confronted with the video of him laughing, he claimed he was caught off guard, and that the laugh was a nervous reaction. When asked why he didn't believe a black man could be a high-ranking DOJ official, he sputtered, "That's not what I thought," but could offer no coherent alternative. His testimony collapsed under the weight of its own bigotry. Sergeant Daniels was forced to admit that the IA report had been rushed and had failed to properly interview the civilian witnesses. The lieutenant who wrote the report pleaded the fifth when asked if he and Miller had coordinated their stories. The city's defense crumbled. 6 months after the lawsuit was filed, the city offered to settle. David, through his attorney, refused the first 3 offers. This wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. The final settlement was for $1,125 million, one of the largest in the state's history for a civil rights case. But the terms went far beyond a monetary payout. The settlement was contingent on the city agreeing to a consent decree with the Department of Justice, David's own department. Officer Keith Miller was fired, his law enforcement certification permanently revoked. The police chief resigned. The IA lieutenant was demoted and reassigned. The consent decree mandated a complete overhaul of the Northwood Police Department's policies on use of force, racial bias training, and civilian complaint procedures, all to be overseen by an independent federal monitor. David donated a significant portion of the settlement to a nonprofit organization that provides legal aid to victims of police misconduct. On the day the settlement was announced, he stood on the steps of the federal courthouse, not in a hoodie, but in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He looked directly into the news cameras, his expression somber but resolute. "This case was never just about what happened to me on one Tuesday afternoon," he said, his voice steady and strong. "It was about what happens every day to countless individuals in this country who are not deputy assistant attorneys general. They are judged not by their character, but by their color. Their rights are violated not because they broke the law, but because they fit a description. Today's outcome is not a celebration, but a solemn reminder of the work that remains. The price of justice should not be a federal lawsuit. It should be the bedrock of our society. My job, and our collective responsibility, is to continue the fight until it is." He finished speaking and walked away from the microphones, the vindication a cold comfort against the chilling knowledge of how easily his story could have ended differently. If not for his position, his knowledge, and his resources, he would have been just another statistic, another black man whose humiliation and abuse were dismissed and buried by the very system sworn to protect him. The fight was won, but the war, he knew, was far from over.